All right. Well, we are here and live with Mandy Rice. I'm so excited to introduce her to you if you don't know who she is. And if you do, then you'll be able to experience her insight and wealth of knowledge live, which I'm excited about. And this topic, I think, is so crucial. We'll be talking about blended learning, flipping the classroom, remote learning and distance learning. I think all of these things are big worries for people right now currently. And I just am so excited, Mandy, to have you here. And what I want to do is, I guess I want to start by just having you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and we'll get started.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm super pumped to be here, and just to be having these conversations, I think is important, and kind of relating with other teachers and recognizing that this is really stressful. It really is, and it's a heavy weight that teachers are carrying. So I think having these conversations amongst teachers, even though virtually, is what's really going to help us kind of stick together in all of it. So I'm super pumped to be having the conversation for sure. So yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Mandy Rice of teachonamission.com. I was in the classroom for 10 years, high school social studies, just outside of Cincinnati, Ohio. And recently I have kind of shifted and am now focusing in my business that I named Teach on a Mission. And it's where I'm supporting teachers, helping them build sustainable classrooms. And recently, building sustainability in classrooms that are more accessible has, become a rather huge necessity. So I'm excited that I've been able to, that I've been doing this for a couple of years now, but that more recently I've been able to support more teachers when they've really needed it. And so I focus primarily on helping teachers flip their classrooms. And then so we've just kind of shifted our message to say, flipping is really relevant right now, but more so that it provides the flexibility for the unpredictable settings that are probably going to be changing a lot, especially this school year. So that's what Teach on a Mission is. Yeah.
All right, awesome. And I know I've been on your site many times. We've been in collaboration on some different things as well. One cool thing is you will be you have a session coming up actually tomorrow during the Teacher Success Open House, but I'm excited for people to dive into that tomorrow as well. Awesome. But I have to say, I actually do love everything that you're doing. I've learned a lot from you already. And I just wanted to, I guess, start off, maybe you could kind of explain maybe a little bit about what exactly is flipped learning or blended learning, or the difference between the two. I know that before I watched your session, I actually had the term and the idea or concept misconstrued myself, and it was very eye-opening for me. So I'd love for you to kind of talk on that a bit.
Yeah, for sure. I should start that conversation by saying that all of these terms are, we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot a little bit in education with all these trendy terms, right? Like these new things like flexible seating was such a huge thing, standards-based grading, flipping, and blended. And there's these terms, right, that sometimes we kind of give a stank eye to, because we think, oh, that's the new silver bullet in education that, everybody's going to jump on that bandwagon and it'll be gone tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of am hesitant to use those terms, but because I'm afraid that teachers think, oh, it's just, the new thing and it's going to go away. Mm-hmm. But I have to say that when I started flipping my classroom it was 2011, I think 2010, something like that. It stuck because of the flexibility that allowed. And it's important for us to kind of distinguish, okay, what does that mean, flipping versus blended? And really how to make it work for your classroom so that it does stick, because we're not using tech for technology's sake. We're not flipping just because it's a cool new thing to do. Yeah. We're doing it because there's a purpose. And the teachers that I work with in my various programs, that's the very first thing that we do, is we establish, why are you here? Why are you wanting to flip your classroom? And it's not just because I have to, because of pandemic learning and distance learning and all of that, right? It's not just that. There's something deeper there. And why is that? Because finding that why and what your purpose is for doing it as the educator in the room, the most educated person in your classroom who's making decisions about the education of the kids in there, right? And as you should be, you're making those decisions, and you want it all to come back to that why. You want it all to come back to that kind of that purpose. So flipping versus blended. Okay, so in a traditional setting, meaning 5 days a week, you see your students in a traditional normal setting. A flipped classroom at its roots means that you have what was traditionally done in class, which most of the time is the teacher is the sage on the stage. They are delivering the content, oftentimes with direct instruction or a lecture, right? Mm-hmm. And at home, then, if you think of like a typical math class, right? Teachers at the board, they're doing formulas, they're teaching up on the board, kind of discussing and disseminating the knowledge on the students that are in their desks. Yeah. And then assign problems for homework. Do these practice problems at home. The flipped classroom flips that. The teacher will put their direct instruction in a video because that's lower on Bloom's taxonomy, right? The kids are sitting and getting, they're absorbing, they're engaging with the information, but they're just kind of absorbing for now. And then that practice, what was the homework, that's higher up Bloom's taxonomy, and therefore is harder work. So the way that I kind of explain this to teachers is, which part do you want them doing in your presence? Mm-hmm. The easier part or the harder part? And they're like, oh, yeah, I guess I want me around to help them and their classmates to help them for the harder part. Mm-hmm. So that's what the flipped classroom does. Blended, to be honest, in my mind, did not mean you're in class 2 days and out of class 3 days, like we're looking at for a lot of schools coming up. That is blended to me was like an almost flipped model, that sometimes you used videos. It could be in or out of class that you use videos for direct instruction. It could also mean that you're exploring in a website, right? Blended to me, when it first kind of was a thing, was we're going to use our computers too to learn. Like when it first started, which now is like, well, duh. Like, of course that's what we're doing. So it's kind of morphed, especially this year, to mean we're only going to see our students like half the time. So we're going to have like the asynchronous and synchronous time of learning is almost like half and half, I guess you could say. It's blended together. It's not mostly in person, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
Like I'm kind of talking in circles there, but I think that was kind of clear, hopefully.
Yeah, no, I definitely I understood what you were saying.
Very good.
Because I think a lot of times people will often think that a flipped classroom is blended learning, or like you had said, blended learning is something where sometimes they're at home, sometimes they're here, kind of what may be happening in the near future in some states, right? So, but the reality of it is, I think you've defined it really well when you said, blended, right? The word blended means we're blending things together, right? So by using, I guess what you could say, almost, your traditional methods with the technology and kind of blending everything together where it makes sense. And the definition of flipped classroom, I'm fascinated with the concept. I've actually tried it a few times in my class as well, and it was great. And I think that what would work really well, and you could probably talk on this too, is when you're using the flipped classroom as a consistent practice, right? So instead of having it become a novelty, but more so just part of what you do every day. I think a lot of times what I have found, and this happened to me as well, I when I first heard of the flipped classroom, I tried it and it was cool. And then I kind of went on with other things, and I realized, you know what, if this is going to work, it needs to be part of the everyday routine, part of what we do. And I just was curious if that's what you agree with, or am I totally off?
It is, and that's why I've designed my program, which is Flip Classroom Formula, helping teachers flip their classroom. That's why it's a bit more intensive, because I say to teachers, look, I don't want you taking this course if you're just going to give it a shot. And because most of the teachers that come to me say, I have tried it, I loved it, I just need to know how to implement it all the time, because I think that's what will allow it to work better. And yes, that is something that I advocate for, but that doesn't mean that you never directly instruct your students in person ever again. And just because you don't do a complete flip and you kind of lean maybe more towards the blended side, doesn't mean that you're not flipping your class. something that I tell teachers over and over again is no two flipped classrooms can, should, or will look the same. Just like no traditional class, any classroom at all, they're not going to look the same. And the same is the case for flipping. Just because, you know, I teach it one way, or I teach it one way, or, you know, a colleague who's doing it another way, doesn't mean you have to. You want to make it work for the students you have, the access that they have, their level, where they are, right? Their needs. You want to make the techniques work for you. But yes, I do believe that consistency is key. And that's with anybody, not just with kids, and teaching them that, hey, there's a huge advantage to this process. Again, I'm kind of making this decision for us because I tend to know what I'm talking about as a teacher, right? You being the teacher in the room, and letting them know, hey, this isn't going to change. I'm willing to work with you and do what we can to make it work for everyone. But yeah, that consistency is key for sure.
Cool. Now, I guess then my question would be, all right, so I think the explanation was great with the way you broke it down. And I see that we're definitely on the same page because I agree consistency is definitely key. For so sure. Then I guess my question would be, because we have a ton of people on, which is awesome.
Yay.
Would you say to the people that are on interested in, okay, I want to flip my classroom, or I want to do something along these lines, what are some tips? Would you be able to share some tips or tricks in either getting started, or how do we go about actually doing it?
Yeah, I would love to. First, let me say this. Something that I've been telling teachers is that, you know, a lot of eyes of teachers are on this whole flipping blended stuff right now, right? And as it should be, we're preparing for the year. And teachers are doing a ton of work starting in early March through, you know, the rest of the school year. Like, teachers are doing a ton of work to make their classrooms accessible. And the biggest thing, like, it's not even a tip, it's just really, if you're going to get anything from this live, this would be it. Make sure that the work you're doing since March through, you know, whenever this ends, make sure it's going to impact more than your pandemic classroom. Make sure that the work you're doing now is going to impact your classroom once we're back to whatever normal looks like. And that, to me, is flipping your classroom is going to give you the flexibility for whatever the schedule looks like, whatever the setting is this year. But then it's also going to allow it the benefits, the advantages of what you've been doing since March and through this school year. It's going to allow those advantages to continue once we're back to normal. So yeah, let me give some tips here.
Cool.
Okay, so a lot of teachers are going to be making videos, right? They're making their flip videos. Kids are most oftentimes going to be watching that at home, depending on their level. Research shows that a teacher's presence and their personality really showing through their virtual presence, whether that's in a Zoom or Google Meet, whether that's in their recorded video, means absolutely everything. Something that we talk about at Teach on a Mission a lot and on our blog is that teachers are the #1 influence on student achievement, right? Research shows that over and over and over again. That's still the case when teaching virtually, remotely, and in a blended classroom. So when you are going to make your videos, I don't know, listen to some Journey before, like turn on some Beyonce or something and make sure that you are smiling and you're showing your personality through that video, which is not easy. It's not. I've been making videos for a really long time, so I'm better at it now. But at first, I remember editing my first video and I had to edit it to put a little caption in there that said, man, I really should smile more often. Like, I was so like nervous. Not that I was nervous, but just like monotone, like on Ferris Bueller's Day Off, you know? Like, yeah. So yeah, really just let your personality shine. A tip that I tell my teachers is maybe you have like your students' picture, like your class photo or something like that, like on your computer around your screen or something that's going to allow you to just be yourself and show your personality on video. And that's really, really important. So that's tip #1. I'm looking at my notes here really quickly. Whether blended or virtual, students, and this is more for students probably like 4th and 5th grade and up who are taking notes when their teachers are giving direct instruction. Students physically writing their notes still is way better than them typing it.
Okay.
So the recommendation that I give to teachers is the only paper really that your students would need in your class is when they're taking notes from your video. Everything else, though, could be digital.
Okay.
I tend to prefer paper tests just because of like the annotation abilities of things. And I predominantly flipped an AP course, and up until this year, all their tests were still paper. So, but that's up to you. But physically writing things out, whether it's Cornell style notes, whether you give them guided notes, they make a graphic organizer. When they are absorbing and like engaging with the information for the first time, they should be physically writing.
Mm-hmm.
After that, digital is great because they're really thinking about and organizing their thoughts and interacting and engaging with the material that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. And I know for me personally, I have and I believe studies have shown this as well, but when we physically write something down, it transfers a lot easier into our brain, right? And I have found that with me, I'm a language arts teacher, right? So we do a lot of writing in our journals and things. And I've had students come up to me and they'll tell me how much they actually love it because I happen to be in a one-to-one school. So we do have computers out and they use them all the time. So when they actually have the opportunity to write things down, they actually love it, right? So it's cool. But for me, I know that when I write things down, I tend to remember them a lot easier than if I just keep it in a notepad or something like that.
Yep, totally. Yeah. Totally. And then the third kind of tip that I have, especially in flipping, especially in like a virtual or blended setting, right? Because no matter which one you go with, depending on what the year requires of us, it's a change, it's a transition. And I think what you're going to find is that it really is going to be a culture change in your classroom. Mm-hmm. With distance learning, the like culture change. Sorry, you probably hear my kiddos in the background. Boys, you got to be quiet, okay? Thank you. Oh, there's my 2-year-old. Sorry about that. Okay, I got to get my frame of mind back.
So the culture change you were kind of
the culture change is very much shifting away from students doing things in your classroom because you're telling them to and because you're giving them a grade. It's shifting away from that. It has to, and shifting more towards you're doing this because we're engaging in the learning process. And I think all of education has been, slowly making that shift. I mean, that's a big shift. It's been kind of making that change, but virtual everything is forcing it even more so because teachers can't be over the shoulders of especially their reluctant learners. I know that culture change isn't, the silver bullet that's going to make every kid care and every kid show up and do all the things that you tell them to do. But here's a tip that I would like to provide that would help in that shift that automatically comes with flipping and blended. You got to give students frequent opportunities to learn from natural consequences. And so I mean that in parenting, I mean that in teaching. And here's what I mean by that. So if I'm telling my students, look, you're taking notes, you're doing the reading, you're, primary source analysis, you're doing the stations, all the things that I've told you to do to prepare, to show mastery on this topic, you're doing to show mastery on this topic. And here's the quiz or whatever the mostly formative assessment is that, you're asking them to prove their mastery. To teach them that lesson better, you need to give them more opportunities to fail. Okay. Now, hang on for a second. I'm not saying fail students. I mean, give them the opportunity to see, oh, wow, you didn't take advantage of those opportunities that I gave you. You didn't take those things that I said, hey, this is going to help you learn this information. And you either didn't do it or we need to tweak some things and make it better because you're doing it, but it's not like registering. And that kind of shifts the role of the teacher in the room, right? That they really become the expert in learning, not teaching. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same thing. But, the teacher serves as let me help you learn this better rather than let me grade your learning and tell you how you're doing after the fact.
Yeah. And I like that because I think that also brings in that, that internal motivation, right, for students, right? It's going to foster that. Like I look at it, I'm I've played sports my whole life, right? And
Yep.
the thing, it's almost like, in a way, being a coach to some extent, where I know for me, when I wanted to be the best hitter that I could be in baseball,
Yep.
there were no shortcuts, right? And I had coaches that would say, here, you need to practice this and practice that. And there were days when I just didn't do it, or I didn't take the time to do it. And instead of them telling me, all right, well, you're a failure and you'll never do this, they were then able to guide me and say, okay, well, you didn't do what I asked you to do. We're going to have to do that so we can progress forward, and you will become a better hitter, right?
And it's ultimately your choice.
Exactly.
Right? To decide, are you going to do it or not?
Exactly, right? And I think, and I love it, because I think that that's the goal, right? The goal isn't to have our kids be performing for a grade, but rather to learn so they can succeed, right?
Yes.
So,
yes.
And I think that what you're talking about actually will do that, right? It provides that internal motivation. I love it.
And that's part of your personality and your presence too, right? Like, you want to be fun, you want to be engaging in that way, in a smiling face, but also kind of like preaching those kind of lessons to your students is part of your classroom culture, and part of your presence that will be, whether virtual or in person, we'll just have to wait and see. Yeah.
Awesome. And I think I love all of those, because I think that with the flipped classroom, like you had said, it's basically taking the traditional classroom and reversing it, right? So, and we get to have the opportunity as teachers to dive in with the work that the kids are doing. So when they need that assistance, we can just dive in and help them, right? And I think that the tips, like I know that I'll just throw them up here. You said a teacher's presence is key, right? I think the thing that I want people to understand, and this is what I loved about your session, which people can watch tomorrow, but and all the work that you're doing, is that the flipped classroom doesn't mean you're changing what it means to be a teacher, right? I mean, in teaching, your presence is key, right? We want to make sure, like in this case, we want to have our students write their notes down. We want them to do that anyway, because we want them to process the information, right? Like you had said, shift away from students doing for a grade and instead for learning processes, right? And you kind of added to give them a chance to fail so they could learn naturally. All of this stuff, I think, is just good teaching, right?
Yeah, and it's you're exactly right.
And I love it. And I think that, and the flipped classroom provides a way, I think, to essentially blend, for lack of a better term, good teaching with a strategy that may be even more beneficial for kids.
Yeah. And it's funny, I was on a live on my page not too long ago, and there was a teacher on there who had already been flipping for years, and she said it, so it like kind of gave me goosebumps at the moment. I said, she said, because I flip my classroom, when I'm in the presence of my students, I am now available to them. Ooh, that's good. That's really good. And I told her, I'm going to use that. Here goes my 2-year-old.
Yeah, and I love it, because that's a big deal, right? To be be present with your kids. A lot of times it's tough to do that when you're trying to do everything all at once.
Yes.
Now, before I let you go, because I know that you're busy, and I really appreciate you coming in.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
But I was wondering, because I know that this 25-minute chat is awesome and the tips are great, but obviously there's a process to learning this, and I know that you really have a great platform for people to do that, and a great way for people to connect with you. What are some ways that they could connect with you? Even dive a little bit deeper into your expertise, things like that.
Yeah, so I actually am offering, it's a PD opportunity, professional development opportunity, coming up on Tuesday, and it's actually going to be live. Most of the time I record some lessons and let teachers kind of go do their thing, but this one's going to be live, because I felt like, let's just get her done, and then give back, right? It's like a as you need it PD workshop. So that's, it's called Blended Classroom Blueprint.
Okay.
A live 2-hour workshop that's on Tuesday, the 28th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And afterwards, I'll be uploading the replay, like in a mini course almost, that they would have lifetime access to. And it's just going to be a jam-packed 2 hours of strategies that help you take what was your classroom into a more flexible, accessible, and sustainable package, right? That's going to help you just be all three of those things for this year: flexible, accessible, and sustainable. Those are our big three.
Awesome. Where can they find that?
Yeah, that's teachonamission.com/blended classroom. So yeah, that's the one coming up. I have a bigger course that's more extensive. It's a 10-week course on flipping your classroom. So they could check that out. That's closed for enrollment right now, but they could get on the waiting list. It's same URL, kind of, teachonamission.com/flipped classroom.
Okay.
I try to keep them simple.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I mean, I would encourage anyone to dive into your work. I love what you do. It's quality stuff, right? So it's things that people can really use. I'm a big component. I guess I'm a big fan of just offering tangible strategies, because being a teacher myself, I want to know, can I walk away and use this, right?
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, I really think that obviously people could jump in. I love that you're part of our group as well. So
yeah.
You know, that's great. People can contact you through the Teacher Success Lounge as well. So I guess to end today, what would be, I'll ask you this, I'll just put you on the spot and see what you think.
Yeah, good.
What would be, if you had to give one main reason why you feel people should adapt or adopt the idea of flipping their classroom, or one big main benefit, what would it be?
So there's two people, really two parties that benefit, right? There's teacher and there's student. And oftentimes when we make a big change like that, we're mostly focusing on our students, as we should. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'll say one for each. Okay. The biggest advantage that I see in flipping for students is by simply making a video of you instructing your students, you have naturally and organically differentiated your instruction. So students on the how quickly you take notes, meaning how quickly your brain can absorb information, from really slow and I need things to be repeated a lot, so I'm, feel humiliated, but I raise my hand anyway in class. That student now gets to pause her teacher and no one has to know about it. Mm-hmm. Likewise, the student at the top of the realm, that they just get to sit there, listen, absorb, and they ace the test every time, right? That's more rare, but it's there. They don't have to get annoyed by the students at the other end. They also get to quickly move on and do enrichment activities. Mm-hmm. And that's all because you made one video. Yeah. And you didn't, it was a lecture that you probably would have given upwards of 4, 5, 6 times in one day. And so you're optimizing your time that way. But for teachers, it's really, our mission is sustainability for teachers. And so that's the biggest one. It's shifting where you put in your work, where you put in your time, so that your time in class, you can be more available for your students. And over the long haul is much more sustainable, by making you accessible, but in ways that's not draining you, that preserves your evenings and weekends for the ones you love. So yeah, awesome. That's it.
Awesome. I love it. I hope that people will dive in and visit your website, teachonamission.com, as well. Yeah, and I have it up there with the blended classroom if they want to take advantage when they're viewing this. If you're viewing the recording of this and it has passed, I would still recommend that you check out the website and see what's going on.
Yeah, it'll still be available even after the live is over, because I'm going to plop it into a course and they can see the replay, get all the resources I'm going to share and everything.
Excellent. Yep. And this, obviously, this recording will be up in the Teacher Success School, as well as our Facebook page and in different places. So thank you so much for...
Yes, thank you, Chuck.
And I guess we'll talk soon, but I hope to see you in the group interacting. And I just wanted to say thank you again so much.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.